Hey everyone, I've chosen to present on the social determinant of health that is housing. Now, this topic really stuck out to me for one reason, and it's because that when you think about housing, what maybe homelessness looks like is this specific picture in your head. But we as social workers have the knowledge to indicate that this is not just a stereotype, which we'll look at the stereotypical in my photos. But first, before we get into all of that, I wanted to give some background on homelessness. Um, it began really with urbanization. Before the 1820s, less than 7% of people lived in cities. So when urbanization became a larger part of the United States, there were housing for workers. So they moved to the city and live in these apartment buildings provided by the companies. And when the Great Depression hit, a lot of those people were left as homeless as we know it. Um, Today's standards, of course, it's the lack of stable housing. It used to be perceived as a lack of moral strength and not necessarily a lack of housing. So, housing is a social determinant of health because you're exposed to the elements. You may not be able to be physically healthy due to this. If you have no housing, that typically equates to the issue of poverty. Someone might not have access to food or clean water or even able to take care of themselves or do self-care activities like bathing. So let's get into my slides. So this first photo that I've chosen is a person sleeping on the street. It's the stereotype I know many people have when they think about homelessness, but this is just one form. Additionally, I chose the specific photo as it shows that this person has barely any coverage, just the clothes on their backs. If it rains, they'll be wet. There's a chance that they could get sick. If they're on the street, there would be a chance of animals or bugs hurting them. And this is just a few things to think about. In this photo, I have decided to show what it might look like when a person is using the shelter system. So that's another taste of homelessness. People can choose to go into a shelter. I've chosen this photo as there is something called couch hopping, and it's another form of homelessness where a person may not be street homeless, but they don't have any stable housing. They might have to stay over at a friend's house or a family member's house, sleeping on the couch, so to speak. Now, I also wanted to find photos that represents the parts of the housing that pertains to the poor conditions that people may experience even if they do have housing. People who live in what is considered rundown housing may be exposed to mold, mildew, those types of things on top of what I previously mentioned, that a person sleeping on the street might be exposed to, like bugs and weather. These conditions can be due to negligent landlords and poverty, or even an inability to physically upkeep the house due to mental or physical health. So this final photo I decided to show in order to expose the incredible contrast of what a nice house may look like versus the things that I've shown. Um, yeah, there are nice houses that don't necessarily look this nice. But again, I wanted to expose the binary that housing really has in America, especially. So let's talk about why. This has a few root causes, housing and lack of housing. And a lot of that does have to do with the lack of affordable housing, lack of low income housing. People are experiencing unemployment. Could be due to mental or physical illness. And low minimum wage. Right now, the United States, I believe, minimum wage is only $7.25, $7.50. And that, with the rising rates in rent and mortgage payments, that is just not enough to afford a place to live. Um, One of the articles that we read, The Social Determinants of Health, It's Time to Consider the Causes, by Paula Braveman, she describes that, and I quote, some aspects of socioeconomic factors are connected to health via responses to relatively direct and rapid acting exposures. Um, and so people who have poor housing conditions, they may become sicker than other people who have better housing, because there is something there that may not have been if they were in a more stable situation, such as mold. And additionally, we also might think of, if they know that there's mold, can they afford to get rid of it? Additionally, again, thinking on the upstream theory, when the larger economic landscape has such a large gap, again, showing, the large binary between those in poverty and those who have wealth, there is definitely a clear example on why people with lack of housing, um, or why homelessness is such a huge social determinant of health. It's the lack of affordable housing, uncontrolled apartment rent, indifferent landlords, and just no support for these people. Because one of the things that I looked into was policies that exacerbate or perpetuate homelessness, and or the lack of affordable housing, and I really was unable to find any policies that necessarily hindered it or hurt it. Um, but the issue is that there's so little or no protection against apartments renters or impoverished homeowners, that often when a person does become homeless, there are only social band-aid solutions and not actual problem-solving policies. Programs like Rapid Housing Program has just, again, puts a band-aid on the issue. Um, it attempts to relocate people into, affordable housing, but from personal experience, I have seen, and as a case manager, that people will often have to wait 30 to 90 days before they can even see a homelessness specialist or social service worker in the state. Um, People can get housing, but they may still be impoverished and unable to pay for any kind of housing, even if it is considered affordable. There's a deeper issue in the lack of income, or lack of support in general. So, as social workers, what can we do? What do I think that I can do as a social worker? I think from a macro perspective, it's really important that we push for policies and faster turnaround for policies that might already exist. So, getting the government to have better renters' rights, hopefully get some sort of rent cap enforced. Especially because sometimes landlords, there is a law in New York State that says they can only increase it a certain amount, but they still do it every single year. And I think that there's even like a 5% increase, and sometimes that's still too much, again, due to the lack of income that people are experiencing. Furthermore, there is an increase in the physical housing, there is a decrease in physical housing in general, so that there's a housing shortage. So people physically cannot be housed. Um, on a micro scale, I may be able to advocate for my clients when at social services if they've just become homeless, getting social workers who are educated with housing assistance to work with social services, be there, to assist people, especially when they initially become homeless. Have social workers being made more available at homeless shelters could be an approach. Having ACT teams, which is having essentially a whole slew of experts to work on one person's needs. So having ACT teams at homeless shelters could really be a solution, or at least something to help. In addition, preventable measures put into place, such as income-based assistance or stronger mental health supports, can be an approach to ending homelessness. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I was able to give you some insight on housing as a social determinant of health.